Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Reynolds, the Chancellor with the Archdiocese of Louisville. Welcome to our podcast series, What's New in ArchLou? This show highlights the people and ministries of the Archdiocese, the Catholic Church in Central Kentucky. Join us each month as we welcome guests to discuss our local church and invite you to get more involved as you deepen your faith and your engagement with the church. This program is brought to you by the ArchLou Podcast Network. Well, we made it to April. Now, April in Kentucky, for those of you who are listening around the country, that means almost Derby time, and that means hay fever, and it means beautiful spring weather, and that means all that and more. So, welcome everybody. Today, we welcome a special guest, as we do each time, a new person with us. This is Richard Tink Guthrie, who's the Vice Chancellor for Administration for the Archdiocese. Tink is a native of Bardstown and a member of St. Joseph Proto Cathedral. He and his wife, Lucia, have 4 grown daughters. And how many grandkids?
4.
4 grandkids? Wow. Tink has worked for the Archdiocese for almost 15 years, joining us in 2011. Prior to accepting the role as Vice Chancellor, he worked with us in strategic planning and mission advancement. Now, Tink, besides that formal stuff, anything else you want to tell us about yourself as we get started with our show today?
Well, certainly as you mentioned, a native of Bardstown from a large Catholic family of 9 children. All grew up there and part of the fabric of the Catholic community, the Catholic education system down there. After college, 28 years in the healthcare industry, working in regulatory and reimbursement consulting across the country, literally in hospitals from corner to corner of the entire United States, from the contiguous United States, from the northwest to southeast and northeast to southwest. Personally, I'm an avid reader, avid outdoor enthusiast. Love anything that takes me outdoors. And after decades of distance running, I've hung up the running shoes and traded them in for hiking boots in more recent years.
Very good, good. Well, we're glad to have you with us. Now, this show takes us back. The last time Tink was on the show was in 2022. He was our second guest ever when we began this series. And in some ways, I'm thinking about this show as kind of a summary show. We want to look back on some of the work that Tink has done over the years, particularly because at the end of this month, Tink is retiring. And we're going to miss him a lot. He's relatively young to be retiring. That's a statement about me, folks. I'm glad for you and for your family you get to do that, and we'll wish well in that. But the show is a look back on some of the key topics, because you've been part of virtually every significant activity in the Archdiocese in the last 15 years. I want to go back just a short ways to the work that you did and others did that began by Pope Francis on the topic of the Synod on Synodality. The Holy See, our Holy Father, called for a new type of synod. It took a 2-year process. But the most interesting thing I wanted to ask you to help us with is, what did that mean for us here? Because it involved lots of activities here as the Church opened up this new topic of synodality. Tink, help us about synodality in the Archdiocese.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was, as you mentioned, it was launched by Pope Francis in 2021. It was initially going to be a 2-year synodal process that evolved into 3 years, essentially, because of the amount of energy and topics that it unleashed. But Pope Francis really did he gifted the world with this initiative on synodality. For locally, what it meant was we had an opportunity, in particular in 2021, at a time of great polarization in a number of ways in households and in communities and in church, that encouraged us to journey together, to listen and learn from one another, which was probably largely what we needed at that time, to find more common ground and understand really what we had more in common than the differences that tended to be more on the surface. So that was a good timing from the Holy Father with regard to that. So for us locally, it really meant an opportunity to flesh out what was on people's minds, what was on their hearts with regard to the Catholic faith, the Catholic Church, their personal relationship with Jesus Christ, with their personal relationship with the people around them. So we were able to, through hundreds of sessions and thousands of people, get that feedback. And one thing we learned that we didn't really expect ahead of time, didn't really have an appreciation for how this might look locally compared to nationally and globally. But it was quite apparent that what we surfaced locally in the central Kentucky, the Archdiocese of Louisville, largely echoed what was being heard around the world. I mean, the local issues were largely the same issues around the world. You know, there certainly were nuances and some subtle differences, but that was quite a learning.
So besides surfacing a lot of important topics to discuss and for the church to reflect on and the Church Universal to reflect on, it also taught us to talk to each other more, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was it was a new opportunity. We were building the process as it was unfolding. I mean, it had never been done before in quite that way, for sure. And one thing that was fascinating with it is the very term of synod process. The term actually was what we did as well as what the outcomes were, meaning journeying together, listening to one another, not knowing where this was coming, allowing the Holy Spirit to be the protagonist of this process. So the synod process itself was of great value, aside from what the fruits of it were.
Very good. I know that the synod have continued since the Second Vatican Council. The popes over the succeeding years would call these synods periodically. The unique one here that involved the much broader conversations around the world. So that's a good thing for all of us to keep in mind as we think about this time in the church that we're in. Okay, another looking back on your time with us. Last summer, the summer of 24, the Archdiocese hosted a part of the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage. This was a precursor to the National Eucharistic Congress that took place in Indianapolis. But here locally, we ended up hosting a pilgrimage that, if I remember right, these were pilgrimages that began in 4 parts of the country, and one of them were people who walked from, I think, Texas or Louisiana, and they walked through our diocese, made many stops, and took us all the way to the walking bridge across the Ohio River, where Catholics, led by our Archbishop, carried the Blessed Sacrament in the monstrance across the Big Four Bridge to pass it forward after it had traveled the country to Archbishop Thompson in southern Indiana. So that's some of what happened. We talked about that on a previous show. Tink, tell our listeners about that experience for you, because you were one of the drivers of this.
Yeah. Certainly, for the Eucharistic Congress itself, I was kind of a liaison with the Archdiocese and many of our hundreds of people across our Archdiocese who wanted to participate in that. As you remember, Dr. Karen Shadle was instrumental for multiple years of the Eucharistic revival. The multi-year revival ultimately culminated in the Eucharistic Congress. So we were, as you mentioned, we were very fortunate locally to have one of the pilgrimage routes, the Juan Diego route, come right through our diocese. I mean, it was a bullseye for us. So I was able to participate in one of the pilgrim walks in Bardstown from the Basilica of St. Joseph to the wonderful community of St. Monica. And then a few days later, participate in the one you mentioned across the Big Four Bridge as we handed off the pilgrimage from the Archdiocese of Louisville over to the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. So that was very fortunate to be able to be part of that and experience that, something I've never been part of before. But to your point about my personal experience with the Congress itself, which took place over 5 days in Indianapolis in July of 2024, 60,000 Catholics from across the United States descended upon Indianapolis for this gathering. And unlike anything I've experienced with that. It primarily was held in two large venues, the Lucas Oil Stadium and then the Indiana Convention Center, which probably has a footprint even larger than the stadium, actually. So event organizers did, I thought, an exceptional job of preparing content with breakout sessions and keynote speakers. There was every day there were multiple opportunities to attend Mass together. There was 24/7 available for Eucharistic adoration. There was daily confession available, and the offerings were really remarkable. Again, the organizers did well. There were some hiccups with a few logistics and things, but that's to be expected with a gathering of that large. So I want to make sure to mention that again, I think it was well planned and well executed. But I learned something significant about myself at that gathering. So I've embraced my faith and my Catholic faith and my relationship with Jesus Christ my entire life. What I learned that week was, despite how well it was done, and I think it was for the masses, the tens of thousands that were there, they were greatly fulfilled by this. I learned that I experienced my faith and my relationship with Jesus Christ much more significantly in groups of 6 or 60,
as opposed to 60,000.
Not 60,000,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
So no matter how well it was done, for me personally, it was difficult for me to plug into what I am nourished by and where I think I can be my best with those smaller groups, and not with attending liturgy with 2,000-3,000 people and watching it on a big screen, or attending the Eucharistic adoration, which was beautifully done, but you have hundreds of people in there at any given time, and they're coming out and coming in and leaving and coming across pews, and it's just it was a learning. So
each of us has our own experiences with those types of encounters, and whether some people probably got ignited by just seeing 60,000 Catholics together, up to someone like you who then relearned the more intimate approach you have to the Eucharist and to Jesus. Very good, good learnings. That's very good. All right, let's go a whole different direction now. One of the projects you've been part of just this past year was the collaboration between the Archdiocese and a place called the Log Still Distillery, which created a local bourbon called Faithfully Crafted, the Trinity Blend Bourbon. Okay, tell us about that a little bit. The founder of the distillery is a son of a former deacon and former priest of the Archdiocese. So Wally Dant was the founder and president of Log Still. But talk about how this collaboration came to be.
Yeah, this has been a ball. So Wally, the Dant family, multi-generation in the distilled spirits industry in southern Nelson County, particularly in the New Haven area. Wally came back to the area, I think somewhere around 2018-ish, to reimagine what that might look like for to reignite the family distillery. And we've had an opportunity to work with Wally extensively in a number of things. He's very engaged in the Archdiocese and the local parishes, certainly the diocesan ministries. So we had an opportunity to work with him in some other event space and such. And Wally approached us a couple of years ago and asked if we've ever thought about some form of a collaboration on a bourbon initiative. And so we talked through this, and what evolved, it was so natural. This intertwining of our Catholic heritage in central Kentucky, and at the same time and in the same place with the same people of the distilled spirits, the bourbon industry. So these people who founded these distilleries in the 1800s, early 1900s, were our same Catholic faithful. They lived in our communities. The distillery sprang up in the same proximities of our churches, and it's continued for generations. So this opportunity to do a collaboration on the Faithfully Crafted bourbon was really, as we looked more into it and began to work through some of the discussion points, it just was such a natural fit, and Wally has been a pleasure to partner with on that.
The Dan family is one of several Catholic families in Central Kentucky who have been part of the distillery industry and the bourbon making. Again, for those not from Kentucky, bourbon is one of our heritages, but it connects us both with the beautiful agriculture that happens in Kentucky, in a particular industry. Wally himself, as I mentioned before, is unique in that his father was a widower, and late in life studied for the priesthood and became a priest and a pastor in our archdiocese. So Wally was already out of the house by the time that all happened, but it's fun to have people think back on that fellow who's part of this new bourbon in the local community. His dad was a priest who was my pastor. So lots of connections. Very, very Kentucky-like. Yes. For all of us. Very good. Okay. One of your jobs as Vice Chancellor has been to help us with all sorts of administrative projects, one of which is something that people probably don't really know goes on, which is every year, just about this time of year, it's announced who's going to be our new pastors, and they get finish up a term of an assignment or have a new assignment, or there's a new need in the archdiocese, or so a priest may retire. So the parishes get ready to welcome a new priest, and the priest gets ready to meet a new community. And one of the ways that you've led us in helping that happen effectively is to prepare packets for the priests, a new tool that would help them best understand their new parish. Obviously, it's meeting people in relationship, but it's also some information. So tell us about about these packets, because they're something that people don't even know exists, but it's a helpful tool. Our priests love getting them.
Yeah. Well, shortly after he became Pope, Pope Francis was celebrating a Chrism Mass in Vatican City. It was probably his first one as Pope, as a matter of fact. But he made a comment that he probably made a number of other places and other times, but I remember this one. He said, our priests are shepherds who need to have the smell of the sheep. And so when you take that analogy and you think of our priest assignments, the new pastors, this is the incoming shepherd who's going into a parish who does not yet know his sheep, does not know the geography, doesn't know the terrain or the topography that he's about to go into, doesn't know where the water sources are, doesn't know where the shelters are. I mean, these come with time, but he's going in as shepherd with all of these unknowns or certain knowns, but many hazy, vague areas. So the packets that we put together for the pastors and try to get to them a couple of months before they take on the new assignment is steeped in information that is data, graphs, trends, maps. Maps are a key part of that. Historical, sacramental data. In essence, trying to help them, at least on paper, to get somewhat of a lay of the land, an initial compass reading that cannot substitute for relationship building and the things that take place once he's there and begins to interact with the people and build those relationships. But at least he can come in with some greater awareness of what some of the trends are and again the water sources and such. So that has been I think well received, and it's kind of become embedded into the process and system in the Archdiocese.
Yeah, it's become a life of the process, a key resource, and that came out of your initiative, and we're grateful, and it will succeed beyond your time with us for sure. All right, one other area I want to mention, which is strategic planning. Planning is part of the work we do as a diocese. We help parishes plan. We help schools plan. We help different ministry areas, from Hispanic ministry to youth ministry to Catholic schools, all different ways we work in planning. And one of your tasks has been to resource parishes. And while we could do a whole show just on all of that, just tell us a little bit about what is the role and function of strategic planning in the Archdiocese, because that's been a whole big lot of part of your work.
Yeah. Well, so much, whether it be the Archdiocese or our parishes, so much of what we do is fighting the fires of the day, fighting the fires of tomorrow that are burning. We have to be intentional about being about looking beyond the immediacy. The immediate items have to be taken care of, no question. But how do we do that simultaneous to looking 3 to 5 years down the road about what we want to become? How can we evolve? How do we better fulfill the mission? So the strategic planning process, again, both in the diocese as well as in our parishes, is an opportunity to try to balance those two. So it's not just, again, fighting the fires of the day. It's trying to be more intentional with a leadership group that the pastor can rely upon to help vision where the parish's mission, ministries, resources are being called to do more than what we're doing today. So we have some resources that we can help to guide the parishes through that process themselves, and it's been widely embraced. I mean, I meet with parishes regularly on this discussion, and rarely do they hear about the process and what's involved in the commitment that they then decide that's probably not a good idea. Actually, it can be actually motivating to them to hear that things that they had some intuition or some instinct that they should be doing but didn't know how to articulate it or how to execute it. We help bring that articulation and that execution to it.
I know you've done a lot with helping parish councils really see strategic planning as a big part of their role.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So parish councils in collaboration with the pastor, so often, there's different variations, but so often it comes back to some version of them having uncertainties and questions about their roles or responsibilities, or that they've gotten maybe off track, or that maybe they're new and looking to get best practices and get good guidance. So we work with them regularly on that. They're highly committed. They're very, very adaptable to understanding what their role is, and we're real good about. We try to be intentional about not giving them requirements and policy procedures, giving them guidelines that they can work within to adapt and evolve and make flexible for their local context.
Really respecting the uniqueness of each of our parish communities. Yeah, very good. All right, we're going to use some time here now to turn a little more personal. We've just talked about 5 or 6 of the areas you've worked in over the last decade and a half. I want to ask you, as a son of the diocese, as a graduate of our schools, as someone who's served now for many years in Dawson leadership, how is the work, or what has the work taught you about your own faith, Tink?
In the larger context, so in the very broad context, by being immersed in this, and what I've always been very careful to recognize that what I do, what we do, it's ministry. It's not a career, a profession. It is those things, but it's first and foremost, it's ministry. So the bigger context of I have come to have a much greater understanding and respect for that fundamental truth, fundamental premise of we are one apostolic church. So as I've had an opportunity to see the vast differences that exist within our parishes, within our presbyterate, within our faithful, within our styles of worship. There's so many nuanced differences and sometimes fairly stark differences, but they're all a healthy difference among that one umbrella of one apostolic church. At the end of the day, we're all rooted in the same truths, the same belief and desire to follow Jesus Christ. So it is, but it manifests itself in the ability of our local congregations and local people being able to do this in certain ways that is certainly permissible in that. So that's a larger context. In a more personal context, I think my time, I've been able to see that, and working with so many of our pastors and our parish staff and agency staff, we're really, in my opinion, we're really all flawed people who are finding a way to seek how do we best follow and serve Jesus Christ. in our own flawed ways. How can we best do that? And that's actually kind of beautiful to behold when you can look at it in that context, that we share this ministry together. We're called to different aspects of ministry, and we certainly do the ministry differently, but we find a way to try to go toward that same beacon, that same point of our existence for serving Christ.
That's a great imagery there. Thanks for sharing that personally. I want to ask you one other question about a little more personal. Thanks to the decisions of our Archbishop and some who've gone before him, in the Archdiocese today we have a Chancellor and 2 Vice Chancellors, all of who are lay people. Your successor will be a lay woman. Dr. Mary Beth Bowling will take over the reins of the Office of Vice Chancellor for Administration sometime later this year. Up until recently, a few years back, all of these roles would have been done by priests. Can you talk a little bit about the development of lay ministry in our diocese from your view? Because you've been right in the leadership role of it, and one of the examples that people think about, the church has changed in this direction.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, the people you point out there. So when we're talking about in our immediate context of our lay leadership, there's Dr. Reynolds, there's Dr. Blackman, and soon to be coming to follow me will be Dr. Bowling, and then there's Tink. So how do we, which of these is not like the others? Three doctors and Tink.
Those are just degrees. They're people. Come on. They're just people.
But it is a very good question. And one of the greatest joys of my ministry has been the opportunity to work in shared ministry with our priests. The priests bring things, obviously, to the ministry of serving the people of Christ in the Catholic Church that only they can do. And for me to be able to have spent years getting to know them and sharing that ministry has really been a great joy. And the lay leaders you're referring to, whether it be in our own diocese or any of these places, the gifts that our lay leaders bring into that ministry are a wonderful, wonderful complement to what our priests and clergy bring. So it's not one better than the other. It's not one subservient to the other. It's actually sharing in that ministry and that complementary nature of way that our lay leaders and the skills and the gifts they bring, being able to supplement and complement what our priests have been doing for generations. And to my way of thinking, at least, what better opportunity to continue to find ways, an expression that I've heard you use many times, we're better together than separate. Yeah. And that would be, I think, a manifestation of that with lay leaders alongside the clergy.
And that brings you to these days of change and transition for you with retirement. So I got one final question I want to ask you as you are an active member of the church and been in leadership for over a decade and a half. I wonder, as you look ahead for the church, 10 years out, what are your hopes and dreams for the Catholic Church as someone who has been in an administrative leadership role but will continue to live out your faith? But what do you hope for the church in the future?
Well, in 10 years for the larger universal church, we're certainly likely looking at a change in the papacy somewhere in that 10 years, which would be a foreshadowing of some of the priorities and some of the directions of the worldwide church, and will be part of whatever that comes. So that'll play out. I think more immediately for our Archdiocese of Louisville and our local parishes in the next 10 years. I think one of the things I most hope, and I am confident we will do, we do it currently, we need to continue to do it, we need to continue to do it better, is finding ways to meet our people where they are. With the fundamental truths do not change, but the way that that truth is communicated does have to evolve. Both the way it is expressed, the mediums and platforms through which it's expressed, the The target audiences of our Catholic faithful are changing in ways that we can't just rely on them finding us. Where we are in place, we are foundational, they will find us. There is some element of that, and for hundreds of years, that was probably the primary way of passing on the faith and the new ones coming in. But we've got to continue to evolve in the ways that we meet them where they are and be invitational for our current Catholics as well as the ones that are on the periphery and then the future Catholics to be able to hear, feel, and accept that invitation into what the Catholic faith offers and the beauty of the faith and the relationship with Jesus Christ. And my hope in that 10 years would be part of that we continue this synodal journey in which we have opened up these doors and this maybe some greater awareness into that journeying together of listening to one another, learning, and being able to better respond to the person across from us, because rather than trying to convince or cajole them into a way of thinking, we're actually listening for where they are and how that can be best used to, again, be invitational and to help them find their way.
Very good. Well, Tink, you've been a wonderful colleague, a close colleague of mine, particularly in these last years. Thank you for being part of this summary show and a look back and a little bit of looking forward to. Thank you for your ministry in the Archdiocese. We appreciate all you've done. You've served so many. You're one of the people who probably served in every one of our 24 counties at some point, all the work that you've done and touched so many ministry areas and so many parishes. And we're grateful. And we thank you for all that has been. To our viewers, April also brings us the holy season of Easter, and we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So blessed Easter to you. Happy springtime. Thank you for joining us for this edition of What's New in ArchLou. Tune in again next month.